long sermons. Just thanks for putting a good example. I think we had a hand here. Oh yeah.
I'm Pastor Makakula from the Women's Union Church. It's a question here on eschatology. Both your presentations left me wondering if you do believe in the rapture or not. If maybe you can clarify that one. I can be there because now I'm a bit confused if you do believe in the rapture.
Amen. Thank you. I think there was a third one here. Yeah.
I don't know if it's a comment or a question.
Sure. Okay.
But in the African continent, there's a general renaissance of the African identity. And that comes in the background of I call it a Eurocentric interpretation of the Bible, which over time has sought to devalue the African child and his place in biblical history. And the question is, or the comment is, as we seek to pursue supporting the Palestinian Christians, we should also seek to decolonize the gospel in South Africa.
Well put. Thank you. Okay, you'll be the last one, and then we go to the.
This one is for Jack. I think in his presentation he mentioned the fact that women play a huge role in reconciliation. What experiences or advice could they share with South Africans, because, and I'm talking in the context of the church, I don't see much of that happening.
Good. Okay. You want to go first?
Okay. So I'll start with the last one first. Regarding experience and advice of women, as you probably see, I'm not a woman, and so I'm hesitant to give any advice on how to engage with. I think that Shireen is the best placed person to do that. So I might avoid that question altogether. And sorry, I didn't catch your name. Jürgen. So regarding your question, so there's two aspects here. Picking one side over the other completely never reaches a final point of reconciliation. And you know this also here, the end of apartheid ended in a negotiation, right? At the end of the day. And so this has to be considered that at the end of the day we are engaging with another side. And another side that also has legitimate grievances, right? However, the structure and system that we are underneath right now can't put this false equivalence. Just give you an example. When my son was born, and my wife was pregnant, just before he was born, we went to the hospital. And the first question they ask is, what race are you? Because we divide the Palestinian women giving birth to the Jewish women giving birth, and you can imagine what the conditions are for the Palestinian women compared to the Jewish. There is no two sides here. There's one side. One side that is oppressing and one side that's being oppressed, without question. And so I don't believe that we should fall into this trap of saying, I'm pro this and pro that, or both sides need to come together equally. No, there is a system, which Jonathan explained, both historically, politically, legally, economically, that is putting one group of people over another. And so we do need to be careful when we pick sides. But here there's no side to pick. How can you pick a side when it comes to racially segregating my wife? For me, there's no, do you see what I mean? And when, for example, within Israel, so I'm a Palestinian, but I have an Israeli citizenship, right? In the schools that we have in Israel, we all fall under the same Ministry of Education. Palestinian schools get 1/11 of the budget that a Jewish school gets, under the same ministry. where are the two sides here? There are no two sides. There is an injustice. And so you are, so in the one hand, we have to point that out. On the other hand, when I have gone overseas, I have been sometimes overwhelmed by the overzealousness of pro-Palestinians, who are more pro-Palestinian than I am as a Palestinian, which sometimes gives me a little bit of hesitancy. So it's definitely worth checking ourselves with the other side constantly. But at the same time, we cannot ignore that when we say the word apartheid, we've thought about it carefully before we use it, right? And what were the two sides of apartheid? It doesn't exist so much until you liberated the side that was under the complete oppression. So I hope that answers your question.
Let's get to the next one. I think if we, unless you
I'll
want to
take
follow up.
the eschatology.
Eschatology and red averages.
You can do the other, right?
Yes. It's a great question, and I really appreciate it. First of all, I'm more concerned about theology of Jesus' return than the rapture itself. So I believe that Jesus will return to judge the living and the dead. And this consummation, theologically speaking, when God restores everything to Himself. And I'm convinced of that. Regarding the rapture itself, we need to be careful when we go there, especially the whole idea of the rapture just came out by dispensationalism in the 19th century. It's not something that's rooted in the church history as a doctrine. In particular, if you go and read the Nicene and Apostolic Creed, they don't talk about the rapture. We are taken into heaven. It talks about God's kingdom coming to that. And that's why we are praying, your kingdom come on earth as is in heaven. And the rapture theology mainly is based on one verse in the Bible from Thessalonians 4:17, right? And going there, you can't build a whole doctrine on one verse. Because the verse itself is more concerned about Jesus returning than we are going up to Jesus. So that's how I will address the rapture. I'm more concerned that Jesus is returning to restore us and the whole creation to God. Just one more point to add here. The rapture is mainly advocating for two people, two plans. Heavenly kingdom and earthly kingdom, and separating between the kingdom of God and the kingdom of heaven. And what the Bible is teaching, actually, when the Bible talks about the kingdom of God and the kingdom of heaven, use the heaven and God interchangeably. Depends on the audience of the scripture where it was written. So there is no two kingdoms, and there is no two people. There's only one people, as I've demonstrated, and there is only one plan. And for the rapture theology, it talks about the church being raptured to heaven, and Israel stays on earth for earthly kingdom, while the church is a heavenly kingdom. And I believe this contradicts with the Bible message in general. God is coming here to establish His kingdom on earth with His people, the church, and whoever believes in Jesus Christ. And we all will be before the throne of God from every nation and tongue, worshiping God and Jesus as a King.
Okay, we take a third round. You want to do a follow-up on that?
Yeah.
Okay, let's take one follow-up and then. Okay, number two.
I wish the one for rapture, we can separate time for all its own. Because for now, I wish we can take a very strong balance in the extremes of Israel's relationship to the Palestinians, and also the extreme of interpreting the scripture from the perspective of the Palestinian Christians. I wish
wish we can have that balance of balancing these two extremes. If let me speak shortly by saying, for me, I feel like apologizing in terms of the extreme. My brother has expressed that the biasness that we had as South African wearing all these things. I feel like saying we apologize on that. We never knew we were consumed by a certain extreme. And let us come back to balance very well these two things. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I think let's take there was three. Oh, you had that one was a comment. It wasn't the one about the African Renaissance. Okay, let's take three. I think there was a question here, George, and then we get you. Who's the third one? The next round. Okay, George, and then we get the second, and then we can round down the Q&A. Unless you want to, anyone else wants to speak to the rapture issue, because I think the rapture. Oh, yeah, I spoke to Shireen. She says it's better to deal with it in her talk. She's, I think that with regard to the rapture, yeah, please, if you can.
I don't want to come across as trying to run away from the question, because I've written a whole lot about this question. End time, rapture, and I studied all of these things, and then I think, is this how we solve a conflict? If you look at the parables of Jesus about waiting for the return of Jesus, they were all involved in us getting busy in kingdom work. So let God figure out how He returns, when He returns, what happens when He returns. And let's get busy in kingdom work. If we have time and everything is fine, we can go together for a coffee and we can discuss eschatology, and it will be fun. I'd love this. I'm a theologian. This is what we do for a living. When Jesus spoke about end times, always the message is get busy, get busy, get busy working, so that when I return, I find you good kingdom work.
Yes. Okay.
So at the end of the day, I don't think we will solve the end time question. We will have various interpretations of the exact scenarios. And as I said, I'm not trying to say that's not important. There is a place for that. But there's something far more urgent and important, especially in our context, which is let's get busy doing kingdom work, doing reconciliation work. And let's get away with theologies that privilege and make us, some people, superior over the other, and so on. I hope this helps.
Very much so. Thanks, Munja. Okay, let's we did George and then that one.
Yeah. Firstly, a comment. I think it would be useful if we can have channels of sharing information, because there's a lot of propaganda, that comes from the other side, and when you have information, you've got power, in a sense, I think the information that was given here has helped us a lot in understanding the real issues. But my question is to Jack. In terms of reconciliation, you mentioned that you are actually focusing on the Jews that are in the land of the Bible. You're not talking about those that are outside. My question is, do you think what you're doing there could be replicated or duplicated, say, outside of Israel, if we pick up such interaction with Palestinians and the Jews outside of that land, especially in context like South Africa, where there are forums, where people meet at interfaith platforms. Yeah.
Okay, next one. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm Amanda, by the way. I'm from Dalton First Brooklyn Cornwall. ask Jack a question? I just love your program that you're doing in the desert. What results have you seen that you've seen come out of that? Because that would be very encouraging.
All right, so first question, why did I made the distinction on purpose. Most Jews in the diaspora don't have the same Zionist ideology the Jews in Israel have. So what one could say is most Zionists are not Jews. Most Zionists are Christians. Right? And to deal with people who live in another country and have other issues is not something that I'm concerned about. If I include all Jews in the world, it suggests that I have a problem with Jews and Judaism, which I don't. Right? This is not a Jewish, Christian, Muslim battle. This is a battle happening in a very specific place with very specific people. And so Jews overseas, of course, have an important role. Palestinian refugees and those that have immigrated, of course, have an important role. And I think something that you suggest about bringing them together is an interesting idea. But my problem is not with them, right? If I meet a Jew from the United Kingdom, he lives in the United Kingdom, I live in Jerusalem, and unless he's involved in the conflict, I have no reason to trouble him, right? And so some of the language that I hear about Jews and Christians and Muslims, I'm uncomfortable with, right? And this idea of including a whole group of people, which is hard to define genetically or not, is a conversation that I stand up against, right? So I think that your idea of engaging with those who are involved in the conflict overseas is something that is being done, but not necessarily in a way of reconciliation, because again, let's take the example, a Jewish person in the United States, he had very little or nothing to do with the Nakba, right? So how can I bring a Palestinian refugee to speak to him? He says, I have nothing to do with it. Why are you talking to me? So this is why I think it's important to engage primarily with the people who are living in the land and in the conflict.
But then who's the third party?
The third party is the international community, which includes these people, but my initial reconciliation is with them, right? If every single bomb and shell that we have seen had made in the USA written up. This is a party to the conflict. The wall that separates me from Yousef is paid not by us, it's paid by people overseas, more specifically the United States. And
South Africa involved in it as well.
okay, well, this also proves the point that people, the international community are engaged. And we cannot solve this conflict without the involvement of the third party. So this is my point. Yeah. I think that was all the questions that I had, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, it's a good
Oh,
news
sorry,
story.
yes, sorry.
The BDS one.
No, that wasn't the question. Okay, yes, success stories. The truth is that the level of success that you have is very hard to measure, right? It's very hard to measure because the system that all these people return them back to their national lines, their theological lines, and to their conflict. However, there are people like myself and many others that have been severely impacted by this. And it has changed the way they understand the conflict forever. Whether it's establishing relationships with each other, whether it's building programs to try and meet the injustice together, this is where it makes a difference, I believe. One person that I talked to, actually just before I came here, he participated in such a program. And he said that when he was recruited into the military, every time he saw a Palestinian, he saw my face and the face of the other Palestinians that he engaged with years ago when he was younger. And that caused him a crisis. You know, these people are not just faceless people. They're people that belong to a community and that have names. And so the impact on this, I think, in changing individual lives has been good. Changing the system that we exist, it hasn't touched the political system that we exist. It hasn't dealt with the higher level injustice.
For I can indulge, ask for your indulgence, is that the right English word?
Yes.
Otherwise, I'll do it Caspian. No, you remember, Baba Mashobo asked me whether I wanted to say something. I had my hand up.
Yeah.
And I said, no, let's leave it for later.
Yes.
You see, because there was a question here which talked about the involvement of the international community, which was not answered earlier, but it has come up again. And you can see he ended by saying, do you want to be part of the problem or the solution? And I just want to say that those of us who are, let me start by saying, for South Africans, we had the same problem as you have, that the whole Christian world supported apartheid.
Yes.
You see, it's the same issue. The British, the Americans, the Germans, the French, the nuclear weapons which were packed up in 1993 before we took over. It's the Americans, the British, and the French who came to South Africa and negotiated that those things they helped them to put up must go before we take over. And because I went into government, I saw the signatures and agreements that were signed. And so we were Christians here, majority Christian actually in our case. The black people were majority Christian. But the Christian world supported the apartheid system. And I think this is the crisis that Palestinian Christians are dealing with. And I think that's what needs to be, that's our role outside now of Palestine. And I said Palestine, Israel, because you can see it was Palestine before it became Palestine, Israel. So, I mean, we went to Washington as Churches Commission on International Affairs to go and say to Washington, the weapons that are killing people come from you. And we went to the churches first. And when we were there, they told us that if you stop the war there, the economy in the United States would collapse. You should check the billions of rands that are involved in that. So it's other interests outside that does that. And so the only thing I want to say is that it's that we are in a very dangerous world where there are two sets of standards. You know, if you remember, I Googled this guy when I wanted to talk earlier. You know the guy who died in the Turkish embassy? Who disappeared? Khashoggi. Because the powerful are involved, nothing will happen. But if it happened in Zimbabwe, I can tell you now, there would have been sanctions and everything that goes with it. So it's all about power in my view, and the morality is out of the door. It was economic interest in South Africa, and it's the same in Israel, Palestine. So I just feel that I can understand. You're talking about getting information. Because of the Churches Commission on International Affairs, I get information about Palestine every day. How many people have been killed? I get it every day. And the world says absolutely nothing. There's nobody who has been occupied for 52 years. Not during our time, maybe in the old days. And you expect people who are occupied as we speak to peacefully go on with life and the world think that to me is the real pain. And I've been there. I met a person who's a Christian evangelical who said, I'm 48 years, it was 2015. I was born occupied. I'm still occupied. I'll die occupied. Now, how do you expect life to continue normally? That to me is the real pain that the world doesn't work on the basis of justice. And for me, the issues of, by the way, the issues of doctrine, Lunta, you are referring to these rapture issues. You know, the issues of doctrines, we can differ. All of us come from different churches. We could debate doctrine, but this is not about doctrine. It's about the justice of God and whether there's justice or there's no justice. Then we can debate our theology afterwards, because for me, it's, the theology is not important in terms of our differences, but it's whether or not what we are talking about produces justice.
Amen. Jack wanted to respond to that also. Would you do that, Jack?
Yeah, thank you so much. It's very informative. We look to South Africa so much. I don't think you know how much we look to South Africa for lessons.
Okay.
Because during the apartheid period, there was a lot of cooperation with the Israeli police, because they needed to know, how do you control such a people the way that you are doing?
The Israelis with the
Yes.
apartheid regime.
And as part of my master's degree, I studied transitional justice. I've studied the TRC more than you can imagine in the process. The imperfect system that it was, but nonetheless how you managed to deal with your grievances and justice. And so you really are a source of inspiration, and Jonathan talked about it. He felt like we feel we are part of it. Kairos Palestine was inspired by the Kairos document here in South Africa. So when we talk about the international community, you are not somewhere over there. You are here with us. And the partnership has already existed much longer. But I think it's time that we push it forward, and I think we will address some of this tomorrow. So thank you very much for your words.
Thank you, Jack. Let's welcome Stian. You want to comment on the same issue or a different one?
He has to welcome me again. To the two of you, thank you very much for your very, very special and moving presentations. So for you, it will be very interesting to see how the twin theologies from the same mother and father of apartheid, South African theology of apartheid was the theology of creation. The apartheid, crime of apartheid theology, Christian Zionism is a theology about eschatology. That one is more damaging because it deals with our future. It may be useful for you to just dance a little bit with us about our history on that theology. But they've got the same DNA from the same mother and father, as they always say, you know, they want to come back without improvements. Thank you for that as well. So with you on what you presented in terms of, we cannot just talk about Palestinians. Insolent. Now, I want to ask you on that two things. One is, have you got stories of the Jewish people when they, if I can call it, fall out of the Zionist closet? What does it mean for them as persons, as individuals in their community, in themselves, etc.? I'm saying that from, you know, there's a part of the South African liberation history which Chikani also referred to, is what does it mean for white people in South Africa to fall out of the apartheid closet? Personally, community, etc. Next thing I just want to ask is, because you talked about it a bit, is there something in the Arab culture, spirituality, suha, about informing you to have this particular theology also of reconciliation? reconciliation between humanity, God, and creation. And why I want to bring that to your attention is that if we leave that out, we are as guilty about apartheid superiority about that. I invite you to read Psalm 8 from the viewpoint of the fishes that were put under our feet. And that is how you say when you read the Bible and you read about Palestine, you know, it's all for the Jews, etc., etc. It's a very interesting thing. If we don't engage with that as well, we dare not think of others who are sort of apartheid supremacists, etc., as part of the reconciliation, because we do with land, the olive trees, and everything that other people do as well.
Fantastic. We have 4 minutes before dinner. So you want to have a go at what Stian said, both of you, as we close the session, because the kitchen staff would like to knock off. So, and they ask that we please present ourselves to the dining room by 6.
So I really appreciate your comment. Sadly, so that some Zionists start going to the creation, showing superiority of the Jewish people over Christians, by the way. So it's not weird. A few months ago I wrote something about theology of superiority and inferiority, actually, not superiority. And Jack wrote something about being paradigms of the conflict on
sons of Isaac and sons of Ishmael.
So we are there now. I think the whole idea of eschatology fell apart somehow. I would frankly say it, because it showed for Christian Zionists it doesn't work anymore. There are so much interpretation and biblical evidence that shows their interpretation of eschatology has fallen apart. So they went for creation and looking at us as inferior to the Jews. So, and I didn't get a chance to go through the whole dispensationalism, but it seems in God's plan that the church itself is inferior to Israel in so many ways, and they are going to the creation to prove that. The second thing, I want to take it from your point to Jack, in defense of the whole reconciliation, and I think Monder can talk about it more, because Monder might be one of the few people and the first people in Palestine who mentioned creation care in the theology of Palestinians. And it's something that we've been working on, because for us, God is not only reconciling us to Him, He's reconciling the whole creation. And it's part of our suffering as Palestinians is our environment. Israelis are cutting olive trees, which I, as a Palestinian, see it as a tree of life for my people. And they have been cutting it and destroying the Palestinian environment. And in a period of time that between 2000 and September 2000 and September 2006, Israel uprooted about 1.4 million trees in Palestine. In the time that we are trying to plant trees, the Israelis are uprooting trees, of course destroying the Palestinian environment. So as Palestinian Christians, we are in progress of developing Palestinian theology of environment and ecology, of course. So,
Thank you, and go for it.
Yeah, hang on, sorry. Just thought it would be good to show this picture, because the land is not just a piece of land; it's a character. It's almost a party. And these trees are planted by your great-great-grandparents and are seen as members of the family. So when they are destroyed, there's a deeper level of hurt. But to answer your question, some of the biggest advocates for Palestinian rights are Israeli Jews. Some of the most successful, outspoken human rights organizations are Israelis who say we do not agree to what is being done, and so we stand side by side with Palestinians who are suffering. And so there is a healthy but small community within Israel who have dropped a lot of the Zionist vision in order to embrace one that is more inclusive. Because the Zionist ideology demands sovereignty. And so there are Israeli Jews who have dropped this, and they work with Palestinian organizations to fight things like the occupation. The price they're paying is very, very heavy, because they are not only accused of what I'm sure is probably very familiar language as traitors and all these things, but they are also taken through the history of Jewish suffering in the Holocaust. They are saying, look how much we suffered and you're endangering us again. And so the level of weight and accusation that is thrown at Israelis who decide to do this is huge. The Israeli military is like a second bar mitzvah. It is the formative adulthood experience as an Israeli citizen. And so Israelis who refuse to do the military are put in jail, and they are looked down upon by the rest of society. Now, both within Israel and Palestine, the opinions are becoming more extreme and polarized, politically speaking. So Israelis who were able once to speak out more are less able to today, because they suffer harassment, violence, state oppression, all these different things. And so there are Israelis who are doing it, but they are paying a very, very heavy price for this. And it's the same thing for those engaged with reconciliation. If you're an Israeli who goes to meet Palestinians, they say, you are legitimizing terrorism and terrorists. You are forgetting the suffering that we have gone through. You are engaging with the enemy. Me as a Palestinian, I've been accused of being a Zionist, if you can imagine, based on what I've just been sharing, of a Jew pleaser, someone who pleases the oppressor to get something, right? A collaborator. You collaborate in order to advance yourself. So all of those who engage with normalizer, all of the people who have engaged in this have paid a heavy price on both sides, but very much on the Israeli side, because you're rocking the boat. You're disturbing the status quo. That was the first question. I've forgotten the second.
Yeah, let's forget the other one.
Yes.
I'd like for us to return to these discussions after dinner. Let's go ahead and